Every time Luffy has turned into Gear 5, his hair and clothing have turned the color of pure white. While a character's hair color changing when they transform is something that occurs frequently in other manga, this is not actually the case in One Piece, and Luffy is in fact the only character in the story whose devil fruit transformation changes the color of his hair. Now, you may think that this is not that important, as after all, Luffy has eaten the sun god Nika fruit, which is a fruit that very literally breaks reality. While the color of Luffy's hair changing is weird, it's no less weird than Luffy being able to grab lightning, or Luffy's eyes literally popping out of his head. This is what I thought as well, until Luffy's most recent fight in the story. Luffy in the Elbaf arc has a fight with Scopper Gaban, one of Goldie Roger's former crewmates, and Gaban makes a mental note about Luffy turning white as he transforms into Gear 5th. This is extremely interesting, because Gaban is someone who went with Roger to the final island and learned the true history of the world, which means that he's one of the very few characters alive who should know absolutely everything about Luffy's devil fruit, far more than Luffy himself. When Luffy fought characters like Kaido and Kizaru in Gear 5th, the only thing they know that was how abnormal Luffy's powers were, while other characters like Saturn, Bonnie and the Giants realized that Luffy's transformation meant that he had the power of Sun God Nika. Yet Gaban, who should know more about Nika than any of these characters, only focused on the fruit turning Luffy white. Gaban also immediately surrendered after Luffy turned into Gear 5th, which could very well mean that the reason why he challenged Luffy in the first place was just so that he could see this transformation with his own eyes. It could be that there's a hidden secret in Luffy's devil fruit awakening turning him white, and this could be something with a deep connection to the ancient history of the One Piece world. While I previously said that Luffy is the only character whose devil fruit changes his hair color, there are in fact characters in the story whose hair is turned white, without the use of devil fruit powers. Instead, the color of their hair changing is connected to the powers of their race. These are the race of minks and the race of fishmen. The minks have a transformation, where if they look upon the full moon, they are changed into a more powerful white form called Sulong. And when the fishmen use a substance called the energy steroids, they just like the minks also become far more powerful, while also having their hair turn white. A very interesting detail to note is that just like Luffy in Gear 5th, the fishmen who've used these steroids also turn old and infirm after they've run out of power. There is also one more non-human race in One Piece who are noted for having white hair, which are the Lunarians. Unlike with the other examples, however, the Lunarians do not undergo a transformation, and their hair color is seemingly always white. However, just like Sulong minks and energy steroided fishmen, the Lunarians are noted to possess incredible strength due to their race. Now, what does any of this actually have to do with Luffy and his devil fruit? It could be that this is all just a coincidence, and these races having white hair has nothing to do with Luffy. Except that we already know that all these races have a deep history with Sun God Nika. In the mural Frankie discovered on Elbaf that seemingly depicts the entire history of the One Piece world, we see minks, fishmen and Lunarians all accompanying Sun God Nika to battle. These races' connection with Nika has also been hinted at before in the story, where the minks, fishmen and Lunarians were all seemingly affiliated with Joy Boy, the previous awakened user of the Nika fruit. The minks to this day wait for the dawn of the world and live atop Shueisha, who is a former companion of Joy Boy. The fishmen in the past were promised to be rescued by Joy Boy, and they to this day seemingly believe in their version of Nika, where Fisher Tiger named his crew of liberated slaves the Sun Pirates, and it was later noted that there was likely a connection between this and Nika. Both the minks and the fishmen also guard the poneglyphs, which bear messages from Joy Boy himself. The Lunarians, however, arguably go the furthest with this connection, where unlike any of the minks or fishmen, they still in the present day remember Joy Boy, where King was waiting for his return to the world. The fact that all three of these races also share Nika's trait of having white hair is extremely interesting, and it makes me wonder, could Nika have had some role in the origin of these races? This could, however, go even deeper, and possibly explain one of the greatest mysteries of the One Piece world. The world of One Piece is full of different kinds of humanoid races, where some are not only a mix between humans and different animals, but there are also races of giant humanoids, tiny humanoids, and even humanoids with elongated limbs. Could it actually be possible that all the races in the One Piece story actually have the one and the same origin? Before I reveal what this origin could possibly be, I still need to go over one more important detail, which is the moon. The Minks turning into Sulong when they see the full moon, and the name of the Lunarians race literally meaning moon people, is to me too big of a coincidence, as the moon is a concept very heavily associated with sun god Nika. When Luffy first awakened his fruit, he jumped right in front of the full moon, and this image is apparently so important to the story that we see it time and again being connected with Nika. The moon could also in many ways be seen as a connecting thread between the peoples of the world who believe in the sun god. In the earlier mural where the Minks, Lunarians and Fishmen are charging into battle with Nika, we also see what appear to be samurai from Wano on their side. Wano itself is a land ruled by the Kosugi clan, who have the kanji of moon in their name, and they are also noted to have a deep history with the race of Minks, another group heavily connected to the moon. The Kosugi clan are also the ones who helped spread Joy Boy's messages across the world through the Poneglyphs. Then there is also the Amatsuki clan, who also have the moon kanji in their name, and who may have an even deeper connection with the Minks than the Kosugi, where unlike Oden, Momonosuke is able to talk to Shueisha, and Momonosuke himself has Amatsuki blood through his mother. Then there is also the race of Shandians. From Enel's cover story, we learned that the Sandians are a race of people who originated from the moon itself, before they came down to live on the planet. And according to Robin, like all the races already mentioned, the Shandians seemingly fought on Joy Boy's side during the Void Century. However, I think that's enough questions for now, and it's time I actually try to give you some answers. To summarize all of this evidence, when Luffy uses his awakened sun god Nika powers, his hair turns white, which is not something that happens with any other devil fruit user. White hair is however a feature of races like the Minks, Fishmen and Lunarians, all of whom have a deep history with Nika. These races, Nika itself, and most of Nika's allies, are also heavily connected to the moon. There's a lot of possibilities on what all of this could mean, and I don't think there's no clear single answer, but here's my theory. The Minks, Fishmen, and Lunarians are all races that were originally modeled on Nika. Not only this, it could be that all the special races we've seen throughout the One Piece world were originally all just humans. The possibility of new races being created artificially has arguably been hinted at for years in the One Piece story, but it truly began to take root with the introduction of the Seraphim. The Seraphim are beings who possess traits from a myriad of races, like humans, Lunarians, Fishmen, Giants, and Buccaneers, and for all intents and purposes, are their own unique race that was born into the world through science. Yet, what Vegapunk frequently notes is that his technology is still far inferior to the technology of the past. If this is true, it could be that the Ancient Kingdom, or whoever ruled the world before them, was also able to create their own unique races to the world through technology. And it could be that these are in fact all the special humanoid races seen throughout the One Piece world, where they were all in the distant past hybrids based on humans and other animals, but not only on animals, but also on devil fruit users. The reason why the Minks, Fishmen and Lunarians have white hair accompanied by tremendous power could all be based on their races being modeled on an ancient user of the sun god Nika fruit, where the Minks and Fishmen are at their peak when their hair turns white, just like Luffy. While the idea of all the special races of the One Piece world having once been humans who were technologically altered could sound strange to some of you, it's actually possible this is something that was set up all the way back in the beginning of the story. The first special race to be ever introduced to the story were the Fishmen, and one of the very first things Arlong ever said was that the Fishmen were evolved versions of humans. Later, Oda himself clarifies that even though they are called fishmen, the species is actually all mammals, just like normal humans. It could in fact be that Arlong is more right than he knows, and that his words about fishmen being evolved humans also applies to every other humanoid race in the story. Even more interesting than Arlong's words, however, is the way the Vegapunks refer to the Seraphim, where they call them the strongest form of humanity. This is quite a thing to say, since some of the Seraphim like S-Shark and S-Bear weren't even based on regular humans. Neither Jinbei or Kuma is human, and whatever modifications their Seraphim have seemingly come from other races like Giants and Lunarians. Yet, the Vegapunks still call them the strongest form of humanity. If we go back to the Minx, Fishmen and Lunarians, the reason why they all have white hair could be the same reason why the Seraphim exist, where these races were all created in the distant past and given traits from sun god Nika, which is why they still to this day are able to mimic some of Nika's power. Still, that's just my theory. I still believe there also has to be some connection between Nika and the moon, considering all the evidence that I previously brought up, but it is hard to reach any conclusion on that one. It is possible that Nika being white is connected to the color of the moon, but arguably, it just as likely could be the sun. A little bit of real life lore, but the real color of the sun is not actually yellow, but actually white. There is however also an alternative take on why Gaban was so interested in Luffy's white transformation, which could hint at Luffy's future potential with his devil fruit. In other words, it could be that Luffy has the potential to undergo a different transformation, where it would turn him into a different form than his current white one. In some of the images we've seen of both the Nika figure and Joy Boy using the fruit, we actually do not see the hair color, as the images are silhouetted. It is not impossible that what Kabano is referring to is that the white form Luffy transforms into is only one of Nika's forms, and Luffy potentially still has other transformations he has not yet unlocked. Despite what Oda may tell you, the story is clearly still far from done, and Luffy still likely has several battles ahead of him in the final saga. The standard for Luffy's big fights is that he experiences some unique power-up during them, whether it's unlocking abilities like Future Sight, Conqueror's Coding, or Gear 50 itself. I think it's natural that this trend will continue, and that Luffy will keep unlocking more power-ups until the end of the story, such as levels to his awakening beyond Gear 50. If Gaban's words hint that Luffy's white form is only the first level to his awakening, it could be that we're in for another change in color when Luffy eventually goes beyond Gear 50. The story has possibly already played around with this idea, where for example, Luffy has appeared in certain cover spreads with red and fiery hair. I'm sure Luffy's hair color changing with Gear 5 was at least partly inspired by Dragon Ball, where it to this day is the series that inspired Oda the most to create One Piece. While there's a fair point that hair color changing when a character transforms is too much like Dragon Ball, I think this is somewhat mitigated by Luffy being the only Devil Fruit user in One Piece this happens to. For the record, I'm not counting Prometheus changing Big Mom's hair into fire. Next, I have something very important to say. Ahoy matey, y'all have done a big mistake by sailing to the end of this video. Now be the time when your wallet be plundered by this channel, says I. These be the wretched dogs this channel has already thrown into the brig, and y'all soon be joining them. Translation: special thanks to all the members for the support, and if you're not a member, consider becoming one if you want to see this channel grow. And thanks a lot for watching this video to the end. I have no idea why I made it so long,